Hi everyone, I'm Chia and welcome back to my channel. I'm back with the August wrap-up. I read 11 books in the month of August and I got through a lot of my TBR surprisingly. So let's get started. The first two books that I read in the month of August were Daisy Hates and the Great Undoing and Magnolia Park's Into the Dark. I have been making my way through the Magnolia Park series since the beginning of this year. I binged the first three books, and then once I got to the last couple of books, I decided to slow down because there's no set date yet and when the next books are gonna be. I stopped halfway through The Great Undoing because I wanted to savor it a little bit. But this book was amazing. Daisy Hayes is my favorite character out of the Magnolia Park series universe. She is my favorite because I love how smart she is. She's incredibly intelligent. She's studying to be a doctor and her intelligence is unmatched. And I love how she helps a lot of her friends out. She can still be vapid and loves a lot of fashion just like Magnolia Parks does, but she deals with a lot of heavier stuff because she is a part of a sort of like gang family, and then they have a lot of rivals that are always coming after the lives of her brother and herself. And she has a very tragic background, so I love seeing things from her perspective. And I loved Jessa Hastings' writing. She writes very descriptively, and I love how she writes human emotions because when she's writing the human emotions of what's going on with the characters, you feel it. And I didn't think this book would be so... It was taking over my life basically, and then I ended up finishing Magnolia Parks Into the Dark. This book was absolutely heartbreaking. If you read the Magnolia Park series, you know the hard stuff that happens with this whole entire group of friendship because there's a lot of hard things that they have to go through and a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of trauma that they have to dig through. It's not what you think it is. It's not this vapid socialite group that only deals with a lot of like superficial events. They do deal with a lot of superficial events. Jessa Hastings made me fall in love with these characters. When I first read Magnolia Park's book, I didn't like Magnolia and BJ whatsoever together. I thought they were so toxic with one another, and I don't think that they deserved each other, and they were better off broken up. But when you're in their heads, because I like the fact that each chapter is a different POV from different characters. Like the Daisy Hates books follow Julian, Daisy, and Christian, and the Magnolia Parks books followed only BJ and Magnolia. And the timelines kind of coincide with each other, but the things that they go through are different. Daisy Hates goes through different things, so does Magnolia Parks, but this one is so heart-wrenching because they have to overcome an event that happened in the last book previously where it ended with a cliffhanger in The Long Way Home. I absolutely love this series. It's a 5-star series for me. The first two were 4 stars, but the last three, especially this one, was 5 stars. So if you haven't picked up the Magnolia Park series yet, please give it a chance. It's not what you think it is. The way people describe it is very superficial and surface level, but it dives deeper into emotional topics. So please pick this up. The next book I read in the month of August was Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I wanted to pick this up because I heard nothing but great things about it. It's a sci-fi fantasy. It's a lot more fantasy than it is sci-fi, but it's set in Mars. And this follows a character named Darrow, who is a part of a society who does class systems, and he is a part of the lowest class system of the reds, and it's different colors, and the highest color system is the gold. And after an unfortunate tragedy, he is dealt a hand that forces him to have to infiltrate into the golds to help break them from the inside out. I really like the way this book was executed. It's absolutely filled with just action. It's a high fantasy story. There are 6 books out for this series, and Pierce Brown's currently writing the 7th one, I believe. And this book is good if you love high fantasy. It's a mixture of, imagine, high fantasy with some sci-fi mixed to it and mixed with sort of Lord of the Flies, because there's an academy that Darrow ends up having to infiltrate and attend. Allows him able to mix into the golds because this is the rite of passage that he has to go through. And I love the commentary on the class system in this book and the unfairness and how it relates to how our society is. And there's absolutely a lot of unfairness between the classes because the class system is brought up a lot in this book. and how every different class it has their own advantages, and it kind of parallels to what's going on in society today and how they are dealt with unfairness from the moment they are born just because of what kind of class they're born in. So if you like high fantasy, absolutely give this a try. It's 5 stars for me, and I can't wait to continue on with the series. And then the cliffhanger that ended in this book makes me want to dive into the next book right away, but I'm trying to savor it because it is one of those books where you have to really pay attention, and I want to remember everything about this book before going into the next one. So if you want to pick this up, highly recommend. And then this month I decided to go through the whole entire 5-book series of Lady of Darkness by Melissa K. Roehrich. I read this at the beginning of the month, Lady of Darkness, and I thought it was great. I gave it a 3.5 though, because I thought the writing was very clunky. I thought that it was still trying to get its footing, and it was doing a lot more telling the story rather than showing it, and there was pages and pages of dialogue of people telling the history of what's going on and the actions that are going on, and instead of doing a storytelling, it just kept going on and on. I got frustrated a little bit halfway through. I was tired of being told what the story is rather than being shown what it is. I gave this book a 3.5. The world and the characters in the story made me keep wanting to keep on going with this story, so I decided to pick up Lady of Shadows right afterwards. Lady of Shadows is so much better than the first one. This one is more about found family. It takes place in a different area than when we started off in the first book. I love the characters in this. I have to say that the main characters are my least favorite ones in the book. I think the side characters are the ones to make it for me, and I do like how the world carries on. I know this book has been compared to a lot of Throne of Glass and ACOTAR because of the storylines that are happening, and also some of the characters are very similar to what happens, because the first girl in this book, Scarlet, is an assassin who is a part of the Black Syndicate, and that the Black Syndicate is basically the Assassin's Guild of this world, and she grew up with harsh ways because she basically was raised by the assassin Mord. And it is very similar to Throne of Glass, and I thought this was similar to a Court of Thorns and Roses, but after halfway through this book it does end up getting its own footing, and I think it starts getting a different storyline, and also the characters are very different from the characters in Throne of Glass and Court of Thorns and Roses. So I decided to continue on because after that it starts taking shape. Third book, Lady of Ashes, we start delving into more of the war that happens in the last few books. This got a 4-star from me, and so did the second book. This also got a 4-star from me. This is like deep into the war now, and they're getting alliances and trying to figure out allies that'll help fight them in the conflict that is happening in this book. And this one was 4 stars for me as well. Lady of Embers was my favorite one out of the whole entire series because I thought this was when it finally got its real footing. I started falling in love with all of the character development between the side characters and the romances that happen, and I love seeing the world expand to beyond the 2 places that we visited in. Lady of Starfire I gave a 4 stars too because I thought it was a great ending, but there was a lot of information that was thrown at us at their last book. There was a lot of information that was introduced and situations that were introduced that were not alluded to in the last few books, and I thought that that was a lot of information overload that it gave us in the 5th book. So because of that, it didn't rank higher than 4 stars. Overall, the whole entire series is a 4-star series for me. I love Melissa K. Roehrich writing. I thought she develops more and more as she writes more books. And the next series I want to read of hers is the Legacy series that has 2 books out, and there's a 3rd book coming out for it in October. And I heard that one is a lot more detailed and a lot more fleshed out than this series is. So I can't wait to dive into that one. But Melissa K. Roehrich is auto-buy author for me, and I can't wait to read more books for her. Next book that I read is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I wanted a palate cleanser in between all the fantasy that I read of the first couple of weeks of August, and I wanted to read a thriller because it's still summer here. And None of This Is True follows a viral podcaster named Alex and a girl named Josie. They bump into each other at a bar because they are celebrating their birthday at the same time. Josie is out with her husband, who is a lot older than her. Alex is out with a bunch of her friends who she's made and her husband. They end up running randomly into each other in front of their kids at school. Josie ends up introducing herself to Alex when she meets her. She knows that Alex is a famous podcaster and tries to persuade her to be a guest on her podcast. As the story goes on, you find out that there is more to Josie than meets the eye, and she has a lot of secrets of her own. And I thought this was good. I gave it a 4 stars. I just thought that the twist at the end I kind of saw coming. Thought it was great. I thought it was a fast read. It was it's not going to be one of my favorite thrillers of all time, but I thought it was great, and I want to read more books by Lisa Jewell. And then the next book that I read, I delved back into fantasy and picked up Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Quicksilver follows a girl named Saris who lives in a mortal world. She and her brother are in poverty and they have to live on the streets. She ends up stealing one of the guards, and unfortunately, because of that item that she steals, she ends up getting caught and thrown into the dungeon. And because of this, she tries to escape, and she unknowingly opens a portal and meets a character named Kingfisher as she opens this portal. I thought this was great. It was fast-paced. I think it's absolutely worth the hype. And I love Callie Hart's writing, and I think the world is not different from what we've read before. It deals with royalty, deals with a lot of hidden identities like usual typical fantasy romances do. But I love the romance between Kingfisher and Saris. The way they develop into romance lovers, I just think it's great. And the banter is so good in this. I love banter between characters. I don't know if this is necessarily slow burn. They are arguing with each other, but then they slowly start getting closer. I thought the story was great, and it's action-packed. I like the magic system in this. It deals a lot with metal magic, and also she is an alchemist, and she has to learn how to manipulate the Quicksilver so that it can form into what she wants it to. I thought the magic system was unique, and the banter was great, and I love the characters, and I can't wait to read the next book because the cliffhanger was crazy. So I highly recommend Quicksilver, and absolutely 5 stars for this as well. And the last book I read in August was What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. We follow a girl named Inez who is from Buenos Aires, and she has parents who live half the year in Egypt because they are excavators, study the history of Egypt. I love history and I love historical fiction. The Egyptian history and Egyptian myths are one of my favorite things to read about. And I loved The Mummy growing up, and the book was compared to The Mummy a lot. And I know it's not like The Mummy at all, so I went into it with an open mind. But I thought the entire story was really boring. There was not a lot of character development, not a lot of plot going on. I thought the writing was beautiful. The way Isabel Ibanez writes is very descriptive, and I really like that. And the way she writes makes you feel like you were a part of the world and you were walking in the streets of Cairo. But I thought the relationship between the two main characters was forced. It didn't feel natural how they fell into it at all. I didn't like the love story, and also there was no plot going on for the whole entire book. The last 50 pages is finally the action that happened, and I thought the action was very boring. I'm disappointed because I had such high hopes for this book, and I wanted to read more about a fantasy set in Egypt. And despite the fact that this is labeled as a fantasy, it's more magical realism than anything. I thought that there was very little magic system in there, and I thought the magic system was confusing. It had a lot to do with objects being touched by magic, but it didn't delve into how the magic system was able to be used by certain people and other characters didn't. They were led to a lot of these items was through magical touch items. And the way that they were described was very surface level. It started off great. I loved the first few chapters of it, and then started going slowly downhill. The book was incredibly disappointing, and I'm so sad about it because I was looking forward to it because I heard nothing but great things about it. And I'm very hesitant of picking up the next book because the characters bored me to death. Did not care about the characters whatsoever. I thought the FMC was so insufferable, and I didn't like how she came across with the way she was trying to convince other people to believe that she was mature enough to take on certain responsibilities. So unfortunately this was a 2 stars for me, which is so sad because I was looking so forward to this book. And that unfortunately ended my month with a bad read, but it's okay. Did have great amazing reads in the beginning of the month. And let me know if you read any of the books that I mentioned, and thank you again for watching. If you want more from me, please subscribe and hit the like button, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.